Hi. This is a historical place. It's the airfield of the Flughafen Berlin Tempelhof, and today I'm going to talk about agile product development, about a historical project, the Berlin Airlift, which has been, finally successfully established after they started a project where nobody did it before, very uncertain circumstances, and did a completely new thing. And I'm gonna explain today how agile methodologies help to establish, to perform that kind of projects, which has never been done before in very complex environments. And you're gonna learn about this right now. Operation Whittles, how to build an airport the agile way. And this has been an airport for many years. It was built in the Third Reich, and after the war it has been a US airport, and afterwards from the 1960s it has been one of the airports of the city of Berlin, like a public civil airport. And today I'm talking from this side because I will talk about the airlift. The airlift was an operation started in 1948. Germany was occupied by the Allied forces, by the Soviet Union, by France, by Britain, and by the USA. And finally, in the Western zones, they introduced the Deutsche Mark. So I got one coin here. It's a 50 Pfennig, 50 cent. And we had this currency until 2002 in West Germany, and the reunited Germany. It was very public, and when I was a child, you could buy sweets with this 50 Pfennig Stück. Actually, from that time when they introduced the Deutsche Mark, the Soviets did not like them to introduce it in the West zones, a known currency, and they decided to blockade the western sectors of Berlin, which was later West Berlin, and organized or occupied by Britain, the USA, and France, and they didn't want to take it. The plan of the Soviets was to take whole Berlin, but the Western Allies decided to do something against it. And the situation at that moment, there were 2.2 million people in Berlin enclosed, and they didn't have supplies with energy and with food. And the facts were like they had food for 36 days, they had medicines for 6 months, they had cokes, which is not the cokes you can buy today in Berlin clubs, but some black thing to eat for 49 days, and they needed supply for it. So that was the fact on 24th of June in 1948. And then they were looking what can they do to help the people in Berlin and to not give up the city and give them to the Soviet Union. And the first idea was to choose a weapon convoy, send it to Berlin and to break the blockade. But some people said it's not wise because they didn't want to risk another war. Second World War was just over, and they used for a peaceful apply. And what they find out and what they had was they had three air sectors which were ensured by contract, and these air sectors were going to the western zones, to Niedersachsen in Germany, to the Hamburg area, to the Braunschweig area, and also to Frankfurt area. And they decided to organize an airlift. The problem was nobody did that big airlift before. Nobody supplied a city of 2.2 million people by an airlift. There were some tries in India, and there were some tries of the Germans in Stalingrad, but never that big, and they were not even sure if they can get enough planes to run that airlift. So what they decided is to ask a guy called General Louis Clay to organize that airlift. Before, he was liberating France, and now he was asked to organize this airlift. He was in favor of the military transport, but finally decided to organize the airlift instead. For this airlift, they did one principle which we can also find in Agile. This is the first delivery was very quick. On 26th of June, so on day 2, they already delivered, like with 2 military planes, officially organized the first delivery of the airlift. They reached 268 tons of The original plan was 750, but they did not succeed in first sprint. But the good thing was the people of Berlin, they could see that the Americans are doing something. They could build up trust with the population. They could show, we don't leave you starving here. They showed, like, we bring supplies by air, we're going to make it by air. And the so-called customers, the people of Berlin, they saw, oh, they are doing something, and they built a trust in this project. Actually, the very first one who brought something was Captain Jack O'Brien, but he was a civilist and he just brought one bag of potatoes, ein Sack Kartoffeln, we say in German, and it was like on the first day on the blockade, the first thing he did was taking his airplane and brought potatoes to Berlin, just to show it's possible to fly to Berlin. With this one, this is very known principle in Agile, to deliver things quick and learn from delivery. And one thing behind is to build trust with the customer. The other thing is to learn it. We have a principle in Agile called inspect and adapt. And by inspecting what you did before, you can adapt it and you can optimize it. And most way, it's better to sit around. In this case, there was no option to sit around. Food supplies were for 36 days. And it's better to like bring a bit of food today than to make a plan how to do it maybe in 40 days, which costs a lot of time. And then you don't learn from it. There might be things you could not think of. And more uncertainties. So building things fast and then inspect it, adapt it is the best way to clear uncertainties, to see if it's actually working, and optimizing things step by step. And these principles were also being used at the airlift operation, and this is why I choose this example for explaining Agile to others. The General Louis de Clay, he was so famous in Berlin. I think you all know the famous speech of John F. Kennedy at the Schönberger Rathaus, but actually who was also there in the 60s was Louis Clay. And the people of Berlin were just getting crazy when he entered the stage, and Kennedy introduced him like he will come again if ever needed, Louis de Clay. And let's see the original video right here.
Ich bin ein Berliner. And to come here in the company of my fellow American, General Clay, who has been in this city during its great moments of crisis, and will come again if ever needed.
Of course, the British also had their heroes. They had another guy organized, Reginald Newham Wade, and he was there on the British side. So we had like two big actors, and both were organizing and making it together in some way. What was key factor of success is continuous improvement. And right here on this place, this picture I show here, it's showing how the airplanes were deploying and how they get the stuff on the airplanes and get it back. And actually this was one key factor, it was one constraint of the process to get the stuff from the airplanes and back on the airplanes. So it was highly optimized. They really were coming airplane by airplane. And imagine like on this place, all the thing was full of airplanes, one coming at the end, get stuff out, and then it was starting again on the other side. And they optimize this process until the end, until they get more and more, and introduce also new people to help them, new workers were applied. So continuous improvement was the key success factor of this operation, and it is the key success factor of any operation you do in a very uncertain and a very complex environment. The other one is transparency, and transparency does mean make as much visible to others as it can. And here we have a thing where they showed metrics of the airlift, and at this point you see like the short tons delivered today and also short tons delivered in total, which were the key metrics, and everyone was able to see it, like the pilots, the workers on the field, everybody could see it, and everybody could align with his common goals and align to get more tons done by the airlift. A principle which could be seen at the airlift was the infrastructure was being built along the operation. Like they did not have planned to build airfields before. Airfields which were there were destroyed from Second World War. even the airfields in the west zone, Niedersachsen, and they needed to repair it. But also during the same time, planes already needed to start. So they did it at night and made it ad hoc, made possible to keep operation going while the infrastructure was rebuilt. And also they applied new technologies. Because the lack of airfields, this airport was not big enough to handle everything on its own. They decided to use water planes, and on seas and rivers in Berlin and in Hamburg they were starting at the Elbe. They were flying and they didn't need a landing field. They could just start from rivers which were there, which were in nature, maybe not as effective, but at the moment they didn't have the better solution. It was the best solution possible for the moment, and they hired these planes everywhere in the world so they can use it for the airlift, and also so that way they could raise the total amount of tons transferred by the airlift. The next thing they decided was to build a completely new airport, and it was at the French sector at that time. It was the airfield Berlin Tegel. And at that point they just smashed a radio station, radio center which was there. They just blasted it to make room for the landing field, so for the roll field. And they started on 5th of August 1948. During that they already optimized the airlift, and they already reached the amounts of tons which were needed on 12th August 1948. So the airlift was continuing, and on another side of Berlin they were building the new roll field, and it was ready 92 days after they started construction. They built an airport in 92 days. For everyone who knows the history of the newest Berlin airport, Berlin-Brandenburg, it has been built for years and years and years and years. And at that time, when the city was blockaded, they had to bring everything in by plane. The infrastructure was still destroyed from war. They will be able to build an airport in 92 days, which is amazing for me. And that's why even I choose this example, how to build an airport the agile way. This historical one, because nowadays in Germany it's been that complicated. This is a good example how to do it the agile way without exhausting planning, but do the most important thing first. And the most important thing for the Berlin Tegel airport was the roll field. It was the longest roll field of whole Europe. And they decided that the roll field has the biggest value for an airport. So what they did in 92 days is they built only a roll field, and they placed the other stuff in tents. They didn't build big buildings because the buildings are not important. You could of course do everything in the tent. It's not as comfortable, but the most valuable thing of an airport is the roll field, because without the outer roll field planes cannot land, and with a roll field planes can land. Everything else is nice, but not that important to bring stuff from A to B. For this airport also introduced German workers, and 19,000 people were actually working on the site. So they did a lot of stuff with manpower. They didn't wait for the right machines, just everyone was involved. And the people were actually happy to work there, that they could help, because they were making it able to get supplied by food, which is necessary to don't starve. Another key success factor was they introduced new technologies on the fly. The traditional Berlin Rosinenbomber, the C-47, was actually replaced by another new type, the C-72, which is a new airplane which has more flight capacity and is still used nowadays sometimes in Alaska or other ways. So it's very robust, very reliable airplane. Besides optimization of all processes, they were also optimizing the management, which is also important. We've seen they had like two powers who were working on this airlift mainly. It was the Americans from the USA and the British people. And of course, if you have two big organizations, it might have complications. They might need more communication between each other. That's why they decided to have a new headquarters where they could better collaborate, and they introduced a new general to operate it. It was General Major William H. Turner in this new operation center. It was in Wiesbaden, so near Frankfurt in Germany. And they also had a lot of special actions, like at Christmas they were flying a camel to Berlin and bring sweets for the children. So even to get more acceptance by the people and to get more popularity and to build more trust, they did special things to make everyone more happy. And I think this kinds of things, like usually there's no big value in bringing camel over, but it gives identity and it makes people able to align better to the whole project. And at December 1948, they finally were able to deliver enough tons through the airlift, and also they had special flights for Christmas. So Christmas is an important holiday in the US and in Germany also. People get more trust, they get more happy about it. They made record after record, and finally in January they delivered 171,000 tons, which is the best of all for that moment. And they made another record, so record by record. You can see them here a bit. It was optimizing all the way. And this is a special story I'm going to tell you. Nowadays in Germany we call the airplanes, which were part of the airlift, we call them Rosinenbomber. And this name is back to a guy called Gail Halverson. And actually he did something which was not planned by management. It was his own decision. And people were calling him Onkel Wackelflügel, which means we are like wackling flies. And he decided to bring some sweets to children to add value. And the recipe of adding value, we also see it in Agile today. So your target should be to make the customer, the user, to give more value to the project. And he just brought some sweets, some resins, rosin, and that's why we call this airplanes Rosinenbomber. Bomber is like a military word, but in this case they were not bringing bombs but bringing sweets, and that was something very positive, and that's how they could build up trust with the popular people from Berlin. And actually it was giving the name and the identity to the whole project. They also did some more records and special actions. They did an extra parade, so a time where they focused on delivering more to build up storage, so it could be easier to supply Berlin. And finally, the airlift reached its target in May 1949. The Soviet government or Soviet people, they accepted that it makes no sense to keep this blockade on site. They saw it's possible to supply Berlin from air, and the other side showed they have the will to supply Berlin, they have the technical skills to supply Berlin, and they have the manpower to do it. So they decided to stop the blockade of Berlin, and they kept on with the airlift to build up storage and build up supplies. And until 1990, until the German reunion and when the Cold War was over and breaking down, the storage was still kept, so Berlin was still able to have storage for months in energy, in coal, but also in food supplies, because everyone was afraid it might be blockade again, but they did not blockade it again. Finally in 1990 everything was taken down, the wall was taken down, and now Berlin is a free and peaceful city. The airport in Berlin Tegel, which is actually a bit outside city, is not still operating, but it has been operating until 2020, and it was a very popular airport. It was able to keep more and more passengers by just building the roll field and building more and more stuff as it applies. It has been a civil airport in the later years, and a lot of people were landing there. All the traffic from Berlin was going there. A lot of people went to holiday. A lot of presidents from the US and other places came over through Berlin Tegel. So it was a very successful airport. Built it under a blockade city, very bad circumstances, but by adapting the principle of iterations and inspect and adapt, they built a very good airport, and maybe better than planning everything and build it like one on a big bang. Build it iteratively under the circumstances. Very good, and very good example for Agile. That was a little story of this field from the Berlin Tempelhof airport. Actually, this airport was one of the first airports in Berlin at all, one of the first airports at all. It has been built out by the Third Reich in Germany, so that's where the architecture comes from. But then it was used for the airlift and being a civil airport all the time. If you want to build something which has never been done before, and which is a complex environment with a lot of uncertainty, then agile methodologies are very good for this. And this is why I keep this example of doing something which has been never done before, a lot of people involved, a lot of new technologies involved, and infrastructure was not there when the project was started. They built it up during the project. Good example of agile practices. If you like this video, share it, comment it, and even tell your friends about it. See you next time, and yeah, have a nice and happy day.